Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I know there's going to be maybe a few more people coming in. We've got some folks online. We are recording. So we will post this afterwards as well. Before we make all of the introductions, I want Mr. Mike Buckley to actually make an announcement. We got a little bit of a surprise this morning, so everybody needs to be aware. Mike?
We notified this morning while we were setting up for coffee that the building is actually without water, and they don't anticipate there being any water until afternoon today. So if you need to use the facilities, please use an adjoining building. This building does not have potable bathrooms.
So we apologize for that. That was not planned. But that's the way things go sometimes. So if you need a quick break, please feel free to get up and go do what you need to do. We certainly understand. So I want to thank everybody for coming this morning on Friday right before homecoming. So appreciate that. Today I'm joined by Ms. Claire Blackwell, who is our institutional assessment coordinator, and Mr. John JB Amaker, who's our data coordinator. Many of you may have been in contact with one or both of them in the past. And so they're here to help today as we talk about program coordination 101, navigating the year ahead. And so we're going to talk about the why of program coordination, the kinds of things that we expect. We're going to give you all an opportunity to engage with us, ask us any questions that you may have. And we'll kind of walk around and talk about a variety of things. And so we'll hand things off throughout the day. So let's go ahead and get started. And let's start with the why. Okay, why is it that we have program coordinators? And I always like to start with the mission of the institution. And as you all know, we now have a new mission statement. So I updated this slide from last year to the new mission statement. And what you can see in our mission statement is that Southern Miss produces graduates who are ready for life, ready to succeed professionally and as responsible citizens in a pluralistic society. How do we know we're doing that, right? That comes down to assessment. That comes down to things that program coordinators do for us, right? We also have our values, and in our values, you can find some places where program coordination becomes quite critical. I'm not going to go through all of the values, but value number 4, academic freedom and faculty inclusion. Each and everybody in here has faculty status. This is part of the shared governance process, is program coordination. Okay. Whoop, sorry. And an evolving curriculum that fosters lifelong curiosity, critical thinking, and prepares our graduates to be ready for life. Right? So these things require faculty input, and this is where the program coordinators come in. Okay. We also have some strategic goals. You all have seen these on the USM website. We want to support student success to foster retention, progression, and graduation. That happens at the faculty level in our programs, right? So how do we monitor this? How do we make improvements towards our student retention, progression, and graduation? We want our students to come, stay with us, and leave as productive graduates. And then, of course, strategically expand undergraduate and graduate enrollments, right? Again, faculty have a central role to play in all of this. Okay, so that's from the institutional perspective. Well, let's talk about from the SAC COC's perspective, and this comes down to SAC COC standard 6.2.c. There are a ton of these standards, and most of them involve faculty in some form or fashion. But 6.2.c is the one that's really relevant for you all. Okay, 6.2.c, all the points, you got to say all the points, right? It's a single sentence, but it has a big impact on the work that you all do. And 6.2.c says for each of its educational programs, the institution assigns appropriate responsibility for program coordination. And in parentheses, this is when SACS comes around, they say program coordination, that this is the standard that they're talking about. Okay. And there's a couple of words in there that SACS really picks on. When SACS comes to visit, and they'll be here in 2026, they will parse each one of these standards by the individual words that they're going to be looking for key evidences for. The first one of those is each. for each of its educational programs. And that means each degree plan as listed in the bulletin. So regardless of what we call it, each degree plan that we have in the bulletin, we have to show that there is program coordination for that, right? And the second one is institution assigns. They're gonna wanna know who's doing what as it relates in the bulletin, and they're gonna wanna know how we've assigned those duties as an institution, okay? And so if you get into the resource manual, which is, they take the little set of standards and then the resource manual is something like that, right? But if you look in the rationale and notes, it kind of talks about the different pieces, right? So because student learning is central to the institution's mission and educational degrees, the faculty has the responsibility for directing this learning enterprise, including overseeing and coordinating educational programs to ensure that each contains essential curricular components, appropriate content and pedagogy, and maintains discipline currency. Again, they're going to parse this out and making sure that we are covering all of these pieces, okay? So again, what is meant by each? I kind of told you it's everything that's in the bulletin, but from the SACS perspective, they say a degree with a defined major is clearly a program. Okay, so that's very important. And in our bulletin, we actually define a major as a degree plan. So that's why when we send them the bulletin, and that's what they want, they say, send us the bulletin, and they're gonna go through it, and they're gonna look through each degree plan, and they're gonna say, who coordinates that? Who's responsible for that as a faculty member? And we have to be able to say, I see Mac, so it's Mac. Mac takes care of that one, right? And so and so forth. Okay. And what is meant by the institution assigns? So we got to show that. So by requiring that the institution assigns appropriate responsibility, there is an expectation that persons responsible for overseeing the curricular content aspects of a program are qualified in fields appropriate to curricular content and degree level of the program. The importance of ensuring the quality of educational programs is the essence of this standard. Okay. And so I get questions all the time about, can a staff member be a program coordinator? So what role do you all think administrative staff can have as a result of what we've just covered? That's a real question.
You can't be a program coordinator.
They cannot be a program coordinator. Does that mean that they can have zero role? No. Of course, administrative staff can help us with administrative tasks, right? It does not mean that you as program coordinator have to do each and everything that needs to be done overall. You can have administrative staff, you can have a number of other faculty, you can have whatever, help you in administering the program as a program coordinator. You do not have to bear the burden of everything, but you are the person who is responsible for all of that, right? And so some of you, I know some of you very well, you would like to just take control and do it all. And that's your choice. That's fine. Some of you would like to direct that, and that's fine too. But at the end of the day, when SACS is on campus, I would say, if you have any questions about that, here's the program coordinator you need to talk to. And we'd bring them in and we'd have a conversation, okay? So administrative staff can have a role in program coordination, but they cannot be the coordinator because they do not have faculty status. Okay, so that's an important point. Everybody in this room has faculty status to be a program coordinator. One of the things that we have to do for SACS COC, for just simple compliance, they have in the resource manual, they have these things that they call questions to consider. And they make it sound like, well, you know, you can consider these questions. Really what SACS means is we want answers to each one of these questions, right? They're just being polite about it. But we have to address each and every one of these questions in the narratives that we write. And so, for example, how does the organizational structure of academic units affect the assignment of appropriate responsibility for program coordination? If the organizational structure does not track with the curricula, how is input gotten? Do coordinators have qualifications appropriate for the degree level of the program? And in what sense are those responsibilities assigned? Okay, we have to address each one of these points in our narrative that we write. And so that's why we have the program coordinator policy that we now have. And so they give us, and again, they say, well, sample documentation. Really what they want is this documentation, right? We need to provide a roster of program coordinators. Until the last 5 or 6 years, probably, we really didn't know who each and every one of our program coordinators are. We now know all of our program coordinators. We sign these each and every year. We need a description of the coordinator responsibilities. We need to show wording in contracts, faculty handbooks, or other documents. Academic organization charts, examples of coordination of curricular content when it doesn't fit the organizational charts. We have to account for all of this stuff. If something is not applicable, SACS really asks us to say that's not applicable in this particular case. So these are the kinds of things that we have to do to be in compliance in standard 6.2.c. Okay, we have a policy for this. For those of you who have not seen the policy, you can find it in policy stat. Okay, it is called the Academic Program Coordinator Policy. It was established in 2021, so maybe 3 or 4 years ago, instead of 5 or 6, time gets away. My area owns it. Ms. Catherine Larry is the one that oversees the review of this particular policy. It is up for review again in January, and we will take a look at it. I'm not anticipating any changes. I think we have a pretty good policy for this. And again, it's very close to SACS visit, so we don't want to change too many things in that regard. Well, let's talk about the policy. There's actually 8 pieces to this policy. It's a fairly short policy. The term program coordinator can include several positions. Many of you have different titles, okay? And so it can include many titles for whatever the case may be for you all. However, non-academic programming is not included in this definition. You may be a program coordinator for some organization on campus. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the academic side here, right? And so we call these SACS COC program coordinators. We have to have a program coordinator identified again for everything that's in our bulletin. You must be qualified to teach at all levels in the program that you've been assigned coordinator responsibilities. You can be tenure track, you can be teaching track. You're all faculty. And so we don't really care too much about the track. But you do need to have received a promotion in rank because we want to make sure that program coordinators have been here a while. Now, some of you may not have been in that boat. There are exceptions to that. Sometimes somebody who has not been promoted is the most qualified to be that. And we ask that the dean have a memo, and that they approve it because program coordination can take time. And if you haven't been tenured or promoted, it's going to take some other time away from other things that you may be expected to do. And so that's there to protect you as faculty members. The coordinator responsibilities must be a part of your expected duties. This is not to be a bolt-on, right? Oh, well, just in your spare time, please do. No, we expect you to be a program coordinator. Your performance in that role needs to be a component of your annual evaluation. Okay? So during your annual evaluation, if you're not being, having discussions with your director or whatever method you all are doing your annual evaluation, you need to, and this needs to be documented as part of your annual evaluation because this is a substantial time commitment for all of you. Every year we review the inventory of program coordinators in September. We just did that. Many of you signed new documents. That does not mean that we hope that every year the program coordinator changes. We hope that you will stay as a program coordinator for multiple years, but we do this once a year in September. And the term of appointment as a program coordinator is at the school director's discretion. So we do not have a time limit. You can be program coordinator until you retire. You can be program coordinator for a year or two, whatever the case may be. But the school director has the discretion to assign these program coordinator responsibilities. Okay? So there are 3 things that I have to tell SACS about your program coordination. They're listed there as 1, 2, 3, right? I have to tell them that program coordinators monitor the academic quality of the programs within their purview. I have to tell them that you all coordinate the assessment of the programs. That does not mean you do all the assessment, right? But you coordinate. And three, that you're working with stakeholders to maintain curricular relevance. Who are stakeholders here? Students can be a stakeholder. Faculty can be a stakeholder. Administration can be a stakeholder. The communities that you serve can be a stakeholder, absolutely, right? All of those things can be stakeholders, and I'm sure you know, accrediting bodies, et cetera, can also be stakeholders in well. And so to maintain the curricular relevance of our programs, a program coordinator is supposed to work with these stakeholders on a relatively regular basis to do this. Every program coordinator in this room has to do those three things. Now, if you're a graduate program coordinator, there's some additional things you've got to do, right? Those are down here. And this came from the graduate school. You got to chair the graduate admissions committee, you got to serve as the faculty liaison, and you got to report program milestones. SAC-COC does not care about those duties, so I don't have to really say much about it. But the graduate school wants those duties of graduate program coordinators, and that's why they are there. Okay, and so if you're looking at a graduate program coordination form, it will have an additional three lines to it, but the first three are the most important. You all should have seen a form that looks something like this, right? With your name, employee ID, your role title, your signature. You know what your coordination duties are. This is how I show SAC-COC that program coordinators were assigned by the institution. Got a bunch of official signatures, right? It's got your signature and you're aware of what your duties are, because those are going to be over here. And again, since this is a graduate form, it's going to have 6. But notice there's a 7. Your director might put 7, 8, 9. That's up to you two, between you and the director of the school, right? I have seen responsibilities for graduate programs be as short as 6. That's the requirement. I've seen it as long as 12 or 13. Okay, that's not for me to decide. Okay, but you know what those responsibilities are for each and every one of the programs that are listed there. We actually provide these copies to SAC-COC so they can go, so-and-so, they have a PhD, they're doing PhD level programs. That all makes sense. And here's the responsibility. You're good to go. Where do we keep this stuff? Where do we house this? We do not hide this from you. This will actually appear in your faculty success account. You will go to appointments and you will be able to see that there. All of this comes to us as PDFs. It's actually kind of a nasty workflow in a lot of respects. And then Mr. Buckley is the one who takes all of that information after I've signed the form at the end, and he puts it in your faculty success account. So you will find it there, and you are listed as a SAC-COC program coordinator. You can go into the system and add things in this panel. We ask that you do not touch the SAC-COC program coordinator designation. Okay? That needs to just be us entering that information on your behalf. Okay? So you will see the programs that you are appointed to, and you'll see the day that it started, and then if you ended, your end date will be there as well. So you can click on one of these, and you will see this kind of information, your SAC program coordinator designation, the program, the level, right? And your responsibilities will be there. The date that you started. And then there will be a PDF. You can always click on that and you can get your forms. Okay? So you have access to this at all times. So you know what your duties are. Okay? So here's an example of one that's been filled out. This one, of course, is kind of old now, but you kind of get the idea of how the flow works. All right, I want to turn it over now to Claire and let her talk to you about a few things.
So we talked about you have these 3 essential roles that we report to SACs. So you might be asking, well, how do I show evidence that I'm actually doing these 3 things?
And you talk a little louder.
Yeah, sorry. The way you can do that is the assessment report through Weave. So when we talk about the assessment report, we're required to do that from SACs. So if you see SAC standard 8.2, we're required to provide assessment reports for GEC courses and also programs. So the standard is the institution is expected to identify outcomes, assess the extent to which it achieves these outcomes, and then provide evidence of seeking improvement. If you're brand new to coordinating, The first and second part, the expected outcomes and assessing those should be already there for you. The outcomes are already defined by someone else prior, and then those findings that you enter in is assessing the extent. The key piece that a lot of people miss though is that providing evidence of seeking improvement. So it's not just about entering the findings, but actually analyzing those findings and trying to make improvements in your program or in student learning. So something I like to compare this to is weightlifting, getting stronger. We want your program and your students to get stronger. So it's not just about getting to a certain level or lifting a certain weight and saying, oh, I'm done. If you want to get stronger, you have to lift heavier. You have to continue to do more things to improve. So this is also from that SAC standard, the 8.2. This is some rationale for why we do assessment. So we want to always enhance student learning. We want to improve our programs. We want to always ask, how can we have a better program? How can we have better student outcomes? And then we also want to use assessment to inform decisions. So we had a few questions entered in about WEAVE. I'm going to answer some of them. I'm not going to go too in-depth about all of these different components. That's something we'll address in a different session later this fall. But what is required of the WEAVE report? If you are brand new, then on the left-hand side, these are things that will already be there for you within the report, and they roll over every single year. So they're not things that you have to change every year. You can if you'd like, but they're always going to show up every year. So that first one is the description, the program description. It's just going to be a brief description about your program. It rolls over. The outcomes are student learning outcomes. So what you expect students to know, think, or do by the time they finish your program. The measures are how you're actually measuring those outcomes. So whether it be an exam, a paper, an internship, some kind of experience that we can measure. And then targets is actual goal. So you want 80% of your students to have an 80% on the exam. It's your actual goal. And then the action plans are your specific plans that you want to enact to result in improvement. And if you enter those into WEAVE, they'll also roll over every year. Now, the parts you're actually responsible for submitting every year are on the right-hand side. So those are your findings, your actual data, your analysis of that data, the target status. So did you actually meet your goal or not? Then you have to update any action plans. So just say if you did any parts of the action plans or finish those out. We also ask that you complete an analysis document that includes an analysis of your program as a whole, but also those action plans. And in that document, you'll also include some information about your enrollment and graduation rates and some analysis of that. And then for the GEC courses, you have some additional documents that you need to provide. Those are like course syllabi, and then an example of the writing requirement. And then you may include some other attachments. For example, you might want to include a rubric for your measure, just to clarify. On the left bottom hand side, you can see the link to our website that's also provided for you on that form. So that link will link you to the academic assessment webpage, where we have some resources about all these different components. We also had another question, where do I get data from our WEAVE report? And that's kind of a big question all over the place. So for your student learning outcomes, you'll have to get that data from other faculty. That's going to be your papers, your exams, those things that you're going to have to reach out to other members of your school to actually get that data from. On the analysis document, we asked for those enrollment and graduation numbers, and that's going to come from the internal site of the institutional research website. On that analysis document, we link step by step how to get that information. But if you want to learn more about that, there is a data literacy course that is offered by the institutional research group, Chelsea Townsend and Amanda Kale. They'll be having another session in spring 2025. So that kind of talks about how to utilize data and the data that's available to you. And if you complete all the modules, attend the sessions, you can also obtain that badge there. Some additional data you may want to include, but it's not required, is HelioCampus data. Not everyone has access to HelioCampus. There's limited licenses available, so only your school director will be able to pull that data for you. But we also send out an email every January to program coordinators on record. It's an automatic email that's sent from HelioCampus. In January, I'll send you all an email saying, hey, this email is coming out. This is the web address or the email address that's coming from. Make sure you check your junk mail. Make sure it doesn't get lost. But that HelioCampus data, again, is just enrollment and graduation numbers. It also has some cost analysis and things like that. we had a question about how do I align national accreditation with program assessment? So if you're already doing assessment for accreditation, you don't have to do a completely different set of assessment for a LEAP report. You can use the same outcomes. So for example, if you already have those outcomes, you can just make those student learning outcomes. And then if you have a big exam like the Praxis or NCLEX, you can always make that your program objective. If you're interested in doing that, you don't think that your accreditation aligns with your outcomes assessment, you can always reach out to me and we can discuss how to align that. So the assessment timeline. So over the whole year, this is what we require you to do for program assessment. So starting in September, you were assigned as coordinator or you were renewed as coordinator. In November, the WEAVE project will become available. So I'll copy over all the projects. So in WEAVE, you never have to start like a new project for your report. It'll always just be there for you. And if you're new, I'll give you access to the new year. So then I'll send you an email, an invitation email. You'll get access and you can look in and see what your outcomes and measures are so you know what data you need to collect. In December, the internal site is updated with data that's available. So the enrollment graduation numbers, November 1st is that census date where they take a snapshot of all our numbers. So later in November, that data gets officially updated. So you can go into the internal site, which is available for all faculty and staff, and you can look at your fall 24 data that's updated. Also in December, you can go ahead and collect any data from other faculty for your WEAVE report. So any of those like papers, exams, things like that, you can go ahead and collect that data while it's on everybody's mind. In January, you'll get that Helio Campus email. In May, again, that data from the internal site is going to become available because that census data is passed, and then you can collect any data for your outcomes. May through August is going to depend on what type of assessment y'all do for your programs. So you can either go ahead and complete your WEAVE report, or if you collect data for the summer, then you can go ahead and start collecting that. And then in July, August, you can submit that. As a reminder, the deadline for WEAVE is historically September 1st. That might shift just a little bit depending on a holiday, but typically it's September 1st. So throughout these, you'll see these little question or little talk boxes. And that's to remind you that at each step of these things, we ask that you share that information within your school and with other faculty. So assessment isn't just a one-way tunnel where you're just submitting these findings and you're done, but it's a conversation. The way to improve your program is to talk to other faculty and other people in your school, let them know what's going on, work together to improve. So for example, when you get the data from the internal site and you get the faculty data, go ahead and look at that and then go ahead and share it with those in your school. So again, throughout the year, it's not too much, it's just a couple points that we ask that you touch base with.
You want me to take that one? Okay. Thank you, Claire. So there's some important takeaways, I think, from what we've been discussing. And the first is, I want you all to know you serve a very vital role. We sincerely appreciate all the hard work that you do as program coordinators. And it's not just from a compliance perspective, but for what it does for our students, making sure that they're in relevant programs and that they're being successful, right? And so it really does ensure the value of our programs if we're doing it right. It's our opportunity as faculty to sit back and reflect on the programs and what we're actually achieving for our students. Okay? It ensures that our programs are aligning with our mission. Different things that we said there. And one of the things that I didn't say early on that I should say right now is SACS is always big on how is what you're doing aligning with your mission. They ask that a lot. We pull the mission statement quite a bit in all of our narratives. And we say, well, this is the part of the mission statement that we're addressing in this standard. So there's many, many places where we're pulling that mission statement and drawing connections to what we do as an institution within our academic program. Student success efforts. We can't do this without program coordination. You all will be the ones that discover whether or not there's an area where students may not be progressing like you would hope. You're going to be the first people that really recognize that. And as Claire mentioned, having those conversations in your faculty meetings, make sure you all schedule some time in a faculty meeting to have these conversations. They don't have to be hard conversations. They're certainly not out there to blame anybody for anything, but when we recognize that maybe we have a class or two or an experience or two where students aren't progressing as we think they should be, it's time for us to self-reflect and see what's going on. What can we do to improve that, right? So very important, and that really does start with the program coordinator. Oh. There's always the compliance piece, right? We've got to be compliant with this. So always like to get that elephant out of the room, really, because it is more than just compliance. We'll talk more about that in the second session. But it is necessary, so we do have to have it, and we just need to say that as well, right? As program coordinators, we really want you to be proactive as opposed to reactive, right? If you're starting to see trends, right, where maybe the program is not as relevant as it may have been 10 years ago, things have changed in the marketplace, things have changed in a variety of ways. Let the faculty know, start those conversations. How can we revitalize, if you will, our program to be more relevant for what students, employers, other stakeholders are expecting students to be able to do? Things change all the time, right? Especially in this technology world that we live in. You know, you can think of, and I'll just pick on computer science. You can imagine what a computer science degree looked like 30 years ago and what it would look like today. And so program coordination is what's responsible for ensuring that we keep up with the times, right? So it is about reputation management as well. Okay. So Claire, you want to talk to them a little bit about the
Sure.
upcoming things that you're going to be doing?
Sure. So we didn't go into a deep dive about how to actually navigate Weave, what it actually looks like to submit the different components of assessment or what that should look like. But in December and then sometime in the spring, I'll be having Assessment 101 workshop similar to this, and I'll walk you through Weave. I'll walk through every component of the assessment report and what it should look like for the complete product.
Just a quick question. How many of you are new program coordinators? Okay, I would highly recommend attending these sessions because there are some mechanical, technical things about just getting through Weave. The way that I like to talk about Weave, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big Weave fan myself, as everybody knows. It's kind of like a Word document in a lot of ways. And so you can treat it like that, but there are some other things that you can do to make it more meaningful. And Claire will walk you through all of those things, how to attach things, et cetera, how to review your standards, et cetera. So in December of 24, you're doing
It'll be both, Assessment 101 will be both in December and spring. I
Okay.
haven't set a date yet though for December.
okay, so keep an eye out for that. We've got the list of all the program coordinators. All the new people, we highly encourage you to go. Existing ones, if you need a refresher, please feel free to attend those as well.
And in the meantime, before that session, if you need to look at anything related to assessment, we have a bunch of resources on our website. I think a lot of people don't know that they're there, but we've really beefed up our website over the past 2 years. It's something I'm responsible for. So you have a link on that sheet to our website. You go to that assessment tab at the bottom, we have a lot of general assessment resources. If you look at our academic assessment, we have resources. We have a new program orientation, like slideshow and a video that I did. It's mostly relevant. We've got a little bit of an update, so just the dashboard's different, but everything else is still the same. You'll find that analysis document template there, different instructions. We also have something we call a compliance rubric. So whenever you complete the report, if you want to like self-grade, we have this rubric you can go through and check through and make sure you have all the components and that you're in compliance with SACS. We also have some different examples of different parts of the Weave report. And then our previous presentation slides from different presentations we do. The recording from this today will also go there. And then if you go to the Weave tab, we also have some resources about navigating Weave itself.
Don't be afraid to contact us. My name is first up there, but don't call me first. Okay? Especially when you're talking about Weave things. I know what Weave does. I've done Weave, but it's, as Claire said, it's gone through some updates. There's some things I probably can't answer. So if you have Weave questions or questions about your student learning outcomes, contact Claire. She will be the one that will be able to help you. If you have any questions about data out of faculty success or anything along those lines, feel free to reach out to JB. He's our institutional effectiveness data coordinator. And so he doesn't deal a whole lot with the weave piece, but he can also probably answer a few questions as well. And then if you have any policy or procedural kind of questions, I'm the person to probably reach out to first. There's usually not many questions. I think this is a pretty clear standard, a pretty clear set of expectations for faculty, but please feel free to reach out to me or anybody on my team if you have any questions at all. And then, of course, you all know Catherine Lowry, our Director for Institutional Effectiveness. Claire will reach out to her if there's questions that she has some, because you all sometimes send us some questions that are like, who knew that was something, right? And so sometimes we have to huddle up, if you will, and try to figure out a solution to a unique problem or question that you all may have. And we're happy to sit down and have meetings and conversations about those things with you as needed. So we've tried to get through this because there is no water in the buildings. They give you all plenty of time to get a bathroom break before the second session that'll start at 10. But are there any questions for this session at this point?
So in November, the WEAVE report that we just completed comes back out. Do we adjust things? I know y'all give feedback.
So in November, this year's report will come out. So the 24-25 that has not been completed yet will be open in case you want to edit anything. And then December, if you want to add some findings, you can. But it's the new report that will come out.
Okay.
And then you mentioned feedback. Right now, the program review committees are reviewing some of the reports. And then as those are finishing up, I'm emailing those back out to the program coordinators.
So we're supposed to update it based on that feedback?
Yes.
You can, and if you have any questions about how, updating, please reach out to Claire and Catherine. They'll be happy to help you. We do not anticipate or expect that your goals and measures and targets remain the same forever, right? Things will change. You will get to a point in some of your things where, hey, this is about as good as we're gonna ever do. We need to move on to something else. You all can do that. We just don't want you to do that every year, right? You need to have some track record of progress. I think, Nick, you have a question?
Wondering if you could email us that presentation.
Sure. Yeah, we'll be happy to email it or put it on our webpage and send you all the link. Be happy for you all to have that.
For dual programs and graduate programs, we end up creating a separate bulletin entry for those, for as far as assessment goes, so they should get assessed separately, or do we?
So you're talking about like dual degrees?
Right.
So like doing an MBA, MPH kind of thing?
Right.
So those aren't programs. Those are pathways. And so each program is assessed. But really what you have in the bulletin for that, we have to explain that to SACS.
Okay.
These things are really pathways by which in your program and somebody else's program, they're kind of double counting a little bit so that they can get both master's degrees at nearly the same time, whatever the case may be. But yes, those aren't, you don't major in the dual degree, right? You're a major in both of them. And so we do this at the major level. I see another hand. All right, well, we will start back up at 10 o'clock. We do have 4 door prizes that we're going to be away, but you have to be present to win. Okay, so, and they're pretty nice door prizes. So
I'll also say real quick, you also have to have signed in with Mike. So if you came in a little late, just make sure you check in with him and get your name on the list.
So we will start back in here sharp at 10 o'clock. Thank you all for attending this morning, and I'll see you back in just a few minutes. All right, folks, it's 10 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate you all staying, and for those that came in new at 10 o'clock, welcome. I'm going to quickly reintroduce ourselves. I'm Doug Masterson, Senior Associate Provost. I oversee institutional effectiveness, institutional research, quality enhancement plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Claire, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Claire Blackwell. I'm the assessment coordinator in IE.
John?
Hey everyone, I'm JB Amaker. You can call me John or JB. I'm the IE data coordinator.
All right. So this particular session is meant to be a little more relaxed than the last one. We had a lot of stuff information to give you. This one is a little more relaxed. Feel free to ask questions along the way, although we have scheduled plenty of time at the end. This will not be a full hour of just us talking to you all. We want this to be interactive. And this session really did come about from a meeting that actually JB and I attended this spring, and JB will talk a little bit more about that. But again, I want to start with our why. And why isn't this working? Let's start with that why.
Making a noise.
You don't know what you did? Well, I don't know what you did. There we go. All right. So as with everything, we start with our mission. And this time I'm going to highlight something a little different in there. In the mission, it talks about lifelong learning approach. Our hallmark is a fully engaged lifelong learning approach. And many of us as faculty, we think we're talking about students, and we certainly are, but we should also be thinking about ourselves, right? And our lifelong learning approach and what our programs are doing. And so I don't know how many of you like to play with ChatGPT. I have really gotten kind of obsessed with playing with ChatGPT. And so I was playing around, collaborating with ChatGPT on this idea of learning and improvement, because as you all know, our big mantra in IE is about continuous improvement. Actually, that's the whole mantra really of SAC-COC, is continuous improvement. And so, you know, when we were thinking about lifelong learning, I asked ChatGPT to kind of think about this a little bit with me. And obviously, learning, I think you all will agree, we're talking about learning new knowledge, new skills, new behaviors. But it was interesting. It can happen without immediate results or measurable gains. And that's not what we're about in institutional effectiveness. We're about learning, of course, but we want to measure this process. So obviously this can happen without it. So, but when you think about improvement, we're talking about a measurable positive change, right? That's really what we're about. We're about taking that learning and how can we take that learning and make it into an improvement, right? So learning fuels improvement. So obviously we have to learn, in addition to our students learning, we need to learn about what our students are learning, right? As faculty and as program coordinators or as directors, whatever the case may be, right? So acquiring new knowledge often leads to improvement, but only when applied correctly. How do we know that we're applying that correctly? Well, that really does come down to assessment, right? That's how we know whether or not we're achieving the things that we hope to achieve. And then, of course, it came back with me that improvement confirms learning. And so I thought that was interesting as well. Okay. Claire, you want to talk about this one?
I can.
Okay.
So as we mentioned last time, these are the 3 responsibilities that program coordinators we expect of y'all, that coincides with SAC-COC. So we expect monitoring the academic quality of programs, coordinating assessment of programs with their purview, and then working with stakeholders to maintain curricular relevance. And all 3 of these things can be captured within assessment.
Yep. Within our Weave system, it's certainly going to be, you're going to find that then, right? And so for many of you who know me, I actually have always said that I think that there are 4 hallmarks to a quality program. First and foremost, I think it's a highly qualified and engaged faculty. First and foremost, we can't have a program without highly qualified and engaged faculty. I think we can check that off, right? A relevant curriculum. Again, getting to that curricular relevance, we have to have an updated curriculum that means something to the students, that they leave with a credential that they can do something with. Go on to graduate school, go to medical school, go into the workforce, whatever their path takes them. Our curriculum needs to be relevant for that. That's the curricular relevancy part. You can have a highly engaged faculty, you can have a highly relevant curriculum, but you also need students, right? We need student enrollment and student interest. Students need to be interested in what we're doing. They want to learn what we are providing. And then the 4th is quality graduates. These folks need to get their degrees and go on and do great things, whatever that may be for them, right? And so these are the 4 things that I think of as hallmarks of program quality. Okay, so JB, you want to take over the survey results?
All right, so again, JB Amaker, I'm the IE data coordinator. And as Dr. Masterson had mentioned, we attended the Watermark Engage conference over the summer, and that was in Minneapolis. And one of the keynote sessions that we attended was actually a featured collaboration between the Chronicle of Higher Education and Watermark. And the Chronicle and Watermark conducted a large national survey on assessment, and they put together a research report associated with that. And the survey looked at faculty and administrators' perceptions of assessment in higher education. And interestingly, their survey found that there was a wide gap between administrators and faculty's opinions on the assessment process. So overall, administrators are much more likely to report that assessment is valuable and informative compared to faculty members. So we kind of realized that the national trends are likely to be similar here at Southern Miss, and we felt that our office could initiate some of the dialogue aimed at increasing faculty buy-in into the assessment process. So here on the slide, you'll see the Chronicle of Higher Education and Watermark survey. Again, they looked at faculty and administrators, and they had 871 people respond in their survey. And then when all of you guys registered for our sessions, we also attached a few of those survey questions onto the end of the registration process, and we had 104 people respond. I'll just note real quick that we asked people who were unable to attend to also fill out the registration form so that we could capture their results to the survey as well. And then this is just a quote from the research report from Watermark and the Chronicle. And we felt that this quote kind of accurately summarized some of the tension within institutional assessment. So assessment sometimes may feel like a burdensome top-down process that takes away from your time doing teaching, research, and other things. But truly, we feel that assessment should complement teaching and learning by improving our program delivery. And at the core of assessment is the goal of improving student learning and student success, which is something that administrators and faculty should have a deeply vested interest in. So we just felt that this quote kind of accurately summarized some of that tension and kind of speaks to some of our survey results that we're about to go over.
So how many of you agreed with that quote? Okay, that's fair. Yeah. And again, there is the compliance piece. We have to do it. But that's not the only reason we're gonna do it. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that as well. Go ahead, JB.
So here's our first question. So assessment is insightful and helpful to the institution. Our results here on the left are going to be from the National Watermark and Chronicle survey. And then our results here on the right are going to be from all of you guys. So nationally, we see a divide among faculty and administrators on the value of assessment on that institutional level. So far more faculty are going to disagree that assessment is helpful compared to administrators in our national average, which is obviously a problem. And then at USM, the results are a little more promising than the national averages. However, you'll notice that our unsure category is still very similar to the national trend, suggesting that there's still plenty of work that we can do on campus and throughout our office. And then real quick, it's also important to note that obviously our survey population is going to have some key differences to the Watermark. So it's not a perfect comparison of these results, but we feel that it's useful nonetheless. So this again was looking at the institutional level. And then our next question, well, actually we have a little discussion before the next question. So if Dr. Masterson, you want to jump in?
Sure. So let's just get the elephant out of the room. SAC COC accreditation says we got to do it. We got to do it. Let's get rid of that, right? We've got to do it. We're going to do it, right? Got it. We have to remain accredited. Why do we have to remain accredited? Because we like this thing called Title IV funding. We like our students to be able to have Pell Grants and loans and other things that come here and achieve great things that we deliver for them, right? And so that's just got to happen. So we got to be able to affirm that we're achieving our mission, right? We got to make sure that we're creating an effective program in an institution, and we have to support student success. And so I would say if you knock off the accreditation, I think everybody, the last three, can kind of agree that that's where we should be, right? we should be fostering student success. We should be making sure that our programs are effective. We want to have a good product that we produce, right? We want people to go off and do great things. We want to achieve our mission. Next slide.
So our next question is pretty similar, but instead of looking at the value of assessment for the university, we're looking at the value of assessment for faculty specifically. So again, our watermark results are going to be on the left and our Southern Miss results here on the right. So you'll see that nationally, about half of faculty reported that assessment outcomes were not insightful and helpful. And then a good size of administrators are simply unsure if faculty find assessment helpful, which indicates a good bit of lack of communication there. If administrators are ultimately unaware of how faculty even feel of assessment on the national level, there's obviously some room for improvement there, that faculty and administrators can increase their communication and increase their opinions on assessment. And then for the USM results here on the right, the strongly disagree response is much less frequent than what shows in the watermark results, which is a very good thing. And then a larger percentage of our USM respondents felt unsure of the value of assessment for faculty. You'll see the unsure box on our results is rather large. So again, there's plenty of room for improvement here, but we were pleased to see that more faculty here at Southern Miss generally would agree that assessment is valuable and insightful compared to what we saw with the national averages from Watermark.
Let me just say real quick on that piece. So faculty find assessment outcomes insightful and helpful. If you do not find your assessment outcomes insightful and helpful, who's responsible for changing that? That's right, program coordinators, the faculty, right? If you're looking at your report and going, I really don't know what this means. Remember, and I'm not picking on you all, but you all came up with these things, right? You can change them. It's okay. I do not want people leaving this thinking that you all need to have a laundry list of outcomes that you are responsible for. More is not more a lot of the time. Well, it is more, but I mean, it's not useful, right? So if you all are sitting down and thinking, I really don't know what we're trying to measure here. I don't know if it's really effective. Have that conversation. Talk to Claire, talk to Catherine, talk to me. We want this stuff to be meaningful to you because if it's meaningful to you, it will be meaningful for our students and our outcomes. I guarantee you that.
Absolutely.
This one. So just like Dr. Masterson says, we want this to be an effective process for you, something that matters to you. So we want you to measure things that matter to your program. If your outcomes are things that you don't care about, it's likely not going to benefit your program or your students at all. We also want you to assess what's unique about your program, really highlight its uniqueness, and really work on improving those things that are unique. For example, sometimes we see outcomes that are just like at the graduate level, which are just like speaking, like oral communication outcomes. And while that is not, I'm not saying that's not important, but that's also a GEC level outcome. So we really would encourage you to highlight in your outcomes things that are unique and important to you. Also, we encourage you to use the data that you already have. So just because you're assessing something doesn't mean you have to create a new thing to be assessed. You don't have to create a new assignment. You don't have to create a new rubric to grade it. You can use the projects that you already have and just incorporate those into your assessment. And then finally, we hope that you share your assessment results and insights. As we mentioned in the previous presentation, assessment is that conversation between faculty and your school director to really make improvements. And so that's really important part of the assessment process. Also, there's this book, Assessment Clear and Simple. We have it up here. It provides some general assessment resources and guidelines for everyone. If you're interested in looking at that book after the session, feel free to come up and look. We also have a couple other books on assessment if you're interested in looking at that.
Most of these things are actually relatively thin. They're pretty easy reads. I read that particular book in a couple of weekends and I had some spare time. Very insightful. Pretty much so what you see here that Claire has listed on this slide or what you're going to get from a book like this. Don't make it complicated. Make it simple. Just make sure it's measurable and impactful for you all.
And then I'll just say real quick on the data piece of this. If you want to collect original data, that's absolutely encouraged, but also not what when we say use the data that you already have available, that not only means data that you've collected in the past and what you may have at the school level, but that also means institutional data that our office and institutional research has compiled. They're a great resource. And if you have any questions, please let us know, because there's a good chance that a lot of the data that would be useful for assessment already exists, and we could easily get that in your hands.
I've got this one? All right, good deal. Gotta have them keep me on track. So what does the data tell you about the program or your students? Right? What does the data tell you about the program or students? That's kind of a question you should be asking, right? Based on that data, what changes can be made to improve the program? Right? You have to take that data and convert it into information. You also have to have a conversation with your colleagues. Right? Just because you are the program coordinator doesn't mean you know everything about the program and the details of what everything's going on in the classroom. You may see something in the data that suggests students are struggling or extremely excelling in a particular area, and that's worthy of a conversation, right? What's going on there? Especially if you find something where students are really excelling at. Are there things that are going on in that particular experience for these students that we can take and duplicate in other areas for improvement? So have those conversations, right? And then what changes can be made to improve student learning? Of course, we want you to have outcomes so that we can look at them longitudinally, at least for a while. But if you're doing this just for compliance and you're just checking off a box, I'd much rather you change things and actually do something that's going to be meaningful.
So our final survey question was basically whether or not assessment was more geared towards compliance or improvement. So here are both of the results from the Watermark survey and our USM survey. And compliance and improvement are both very important elements of the assessment process. But again, we want to stress that they do not have to be mutually exclusive, and they can actually work together. So the national results for this question are spread out pretty equally among those options of compliance, improvement, and equal. But the USM results specifically show a rather small percentage of respondents who felt that improvement was the primary goal of assessment. So this highlights another area of future improvement for our office and the institution as a whole. It seems like we're doing a great job relaying the value towards compliance. But looking at, again, the national averages, there were a lot more faculty and administrators on that national level that were willing to agree that assessment was valuable for the improvement aspect. So a lot of this conversation and presentation today was about trying to show you the value for the improvement pieces as well.
So like JB said, we're trying to help bridge that gap between that compliance and improvement. We want to relay that assessment is not just an obligation, but it's an opportunity for you all to highlight the good things you do and the good changes that you're making. If you only assess for compliance, then you're just missing an opportunity to improve. And then also the assessment showcases our program and institutional improvement. We often pull these leave reports for our SACS report and show these to other institutions, the good work that we're doing. And then, like JB said, we're trying to bridge that gap. So there's this quote, that part of the rift seems to be caused by poor communication. And since we say that assessment is a conversation, it's not only a conversation between the faculty, but it's also a conversation between us and IE and y'all. And that's something we've really been trying to work on these past few years. So we hope to get better. It's why we're having these sessions today, while we'll have future sessions, and while we email you so much.
Yeah, so just another point on that, as Claire mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of improvements to our website. So we would really appreciate all of you, at least visiting the website, seeing what we have available. Sometimes you can find your answers there without having to need to reach out and do that kind of on your own time. But we've also developed some social medias. You all want to talk quickly about that? And if you want to follow us on social media, there were periodic posts that Claire or JB will post about some interesting article or some interesting tidbit that we took away maybe from a conference. that you all might find useful?
Yeah, highly encourage you guys, if you're interested, to follow us on your preferred social media platform. The QR code on your handout is going to link you not only to some helpful resources and links, but also to our social media platforms online.
So we wanted to have the majority of the time today, not about us being up here and just talking to you all, but actually starting that communication about how we can narrow that rift that seems to be there between administration and faculty in terms of assessment and the importance of assessment. And so we're going to ask a couple of questions, and this is active learning time, right? So want you all to feel free to raise your hand and give us your insights, your thoughts, and let's have a little bit of back and forth. So the first question that we have, how do you collect assessment data? Matt?
So in biology, we've gone to a model of collecting pre-test and post test data, so collecting how they do on a subject area at the beginning of the course and then at the very end, and see if there's been a big change or been a change, hopefully a big change in positive.
Okay, all right, very good. Any other? Yeah.
In nutrition, we have the credit program, but and we have certain things that we have to measure, but we basically have student learning objectives that are in each class that the faculty are responsible to implement the assignment or the activity. And then at the end of that semester, I'll collect all the data from faculty.
So that was a very important piece, and I want to make sure that it gets recorded. At the end of the semester, you collect, right? So I was a program coordinator before we called them program coordinators for chemistry and biochemistry back in the day. And the first time I ever filled out a report, I got started in May. And then finding all of the information was actually quite challenging because you had an adjunct that taught in the fall and was no longer there, right? It's very important, in my opinion, you can do it however you want, but in my opinion, to stay on top of that and collect it as it is generated, right? So that you have access to it, especially for those programs that rely on ethics.
In our school of construction and design, we have end of the semester assessment based on accrediting bodies, student learning outcomes, and then we use that in the week.
Very good. Yeah, that's another good point. How many of you all are in accredited programs? A good number of you, right? Not everybody has an accredited program, and that's fine. I want to reiterate what Claire said earlier in session one. You do not need to duplicate your efforts. If your accrediting body says you need to do these 8 things, those 8 things will most likely be acceptable for our Weave report. If you have some questions about that, reach out to Claire, reach out to Catherine. But it wasn't that many years ago, at least it doesn't seem like it. I'm getting older, so time is flying a lot faster. But I do remember when we had a couple of programs that were accredited and their Weave looked nothing like their accreditation, and they were coming to us complaining about all this assessment. And I went, well, of course you are. Once I knew that that's what was happening, and they were under the misunderstanding of we had to be different than the national accrediting body. It does not. Okay? It does not. In fact, Weave requires 4 student learning outcomes.
Right, and so if you have more than 4 outcomes, you do not have to include your whole accrediting body assessment in your week. You can if you would like, but we only ask for 4 outcomes.
But I do find that a number of accredited programs will go ahead and put all that information in Weave, so it's a repository for all that. So you are certainly more than welcome to do that. Anything else on this question? Vern?
Well, it can be pretty helpful for various outcomes that are just there and need to be assessed at the end to get, but of course, with the capstone course. And then it helps a lot if you're the one that teaches the capstone course and you enjoy that. So for example, for a math major, we want them to have decent coding skills. And I teach our data science capstone course where they code in R, and so that part of the Weave report was check, 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 dude, check, check, check. And I mean, so there was something where somebody else then would have to read a lot and then look into the code and all that. Whereas if you've done it yourself, you still remember typically for a smaller program. I mean, if you've got 200 graduates, which I don't think anything does, but with larger numbers, it gets worse.
There are some big programs, but you bring up a very good point about capstone. I was on the GEC committee many years ago, when a lot of this stuff about capstone and writing through the curriculum and all that kind of stuff was discussed. And what I will tell you is that the capstone is intended to be a point of assessment. Okay? It is why when some of you, I don't think anybody in this room, but when some people have reached out to me and said, we've got a double major and we want to substitute the capstone so they don't have to take two capstones. The answer is always no. And why is the answer no? Because it is different in history than in biology. You should be capturing things, right, that are different. It is a point of assessment for a program, and every one of our programs has a capstone at the undergraduate level, of course, right? Some graduate programs have capstones as well. So Bert, you bring up a good point. Capstone is an excellent place to capture a lot of information about how your students have progressed through your program, right? It is a finishing stone. That's what capstone kind of means. Any other points on this particular one? Yes.
Question real quick. This was from the PDF that Mike sent out earlier in the week, the report from the collaboration you guys have been talking through. One of the things was mentioned that there was a university that was able to, I think they used the word probes that they put into the learning management system,
Yes.
basically automatically collect data.
Yep.
Has anybody successfully pulled that off in Canvas? Because we're still exporting grade books, having people sort it through, send me things. There's a lot of points of failure along.
You bring up an excellent point, and what I will say is, if I had the ability to do so today, and Claire, don't shoot me, I would kill weed. Because weed.
I think you just.
And the reason is because I can't integrate weave into everything. Right, there is a platform out there that we've been looking at that has connectors, and I'm using that term, I don't know if that's a real technical term, but connectors into Canvas to where faculty can say, this is my assessment piece, and it will pull that information out as you grade with your rubric and automatically populate that. That's where we want to go. But I'm gonna be bluntly honest with you. Weave costs us 18 grand a year. This other product, multiples of that. It's just the reality. And so Weave does what the minimum we need to do. It does not do what we aspire to do. I had one question over here real quick.
We have exit surveys.
Huh?
We try to get what students experience within the program, like based on our goals.
Exit surveys are a great tool to use. The problem with exit surveys for a lot of folks is that they end up putting on your computer or somebody else's computer, and then how do we access that later? That's another thing that we're trying to work on to get this more incorporated.
Response rates. We do exit surveys too, and we put them as part of their exam for Canvas, so. Well, then it doesn't become anonymous. They answer it very honestly, I promise. And then it becomes the school property because it's in the school comprehensive exam shell.
Oh, that's a very good idea.
You may have answered this with your minimum expectations of fee, but why can't they put in some text boxes for those that, start closing the loop on it?
Question for Claire.
Weave has limited boxes that we cannot change the titles or how many there are there. Same with the action plan boxes that are often confusing to complete. We cannot edit those.
Sometimes you get what you pay for. Bert, last question on this. The last piece.
I've heard, and that may be totally wrong, that the university also does an exit survey.
We do.
And would it be possible to really get the response rate to have a disciplinary exit survey attached to that for the major?
Do you have?
Yeah, so our university-wide assessment survey, I spent a lot of time with the institutional research folks, so this is why I know this. We don't have a very good response rate. So even if you did that, you're likely to not get many responses. The thing that we've seen work best is if you require an exit survey as part of your capstone as a grade, like as a completion grade, like, yes, you did it. Because then it requires people to complete the survey.
I will just say that we have had people out of IR that have attended some conferences recently and have brought back some, for lack of a better term, best practices that we're going to be mulling over and sharing with you all to see if maybe we might want to move in a direction of collecting some of this stuff through a common Canvas show. You can imagine the abilities that that would give us, but also the challenges, right? Because everybody obviously might want to have different questions and stuff, so we're definitely thinking along those lines. Next question, Jamie.
Before I move on real quick, just want to mention with the collecting assessment data, it's best if you give other faculty a heads up of what you need before you actually need it. Keep having those conversations throughout the semester, look at Weave when it opens and know what you need. That way faculty have a heads up and you can collect it from like adjuncts before they disappear forever.
Yeah, getting data from adjuncts has been a challenge. We have had a few calls from folks where they say, can you get? And I'm like, you gotta call Tom Hutchinson. I don't know how to do Canvas stuff. And I'm not sure if you can get it, right? And so, please communicate with your adjuncts or your visiting faculty who may not be here very long, the importance of what it is that you're asking them to do, and make sure that they give that to you in whatever format you need it in before they leave. So how do you share assessment data with your program faculty?
Do a, end of the year faculty meeting, or in the summer, we've done faculty retreat, so that could be, they're not on contact.
Okay. That's it, yeah.
We do work groups.
Work groups?
That meet periodically for both the graduate and undergraduate program.
So that would be the program coordinators and the faculty that are in those?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I just do it in program meetings. Here's what I did, here's how I submitted, like look at the trends, share the Helio Campus data screenshots or the enrollment trends so that they can not only see the report that's been done, but the data that comes from that, and then the multi-year trend.
Right, okay, that's good. I see another hand. Yeah.
Indirectly by having them involved in developing, action plans for those measures that aren't met, so that it's not just kind of a top-down approach, but it involves them and how they see that we can make improvements.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And I think it comes back to what we were saying in the first session. You all are not responsible for doing everything, right? And so the standard says the faculty, of which you have a program coordinator who is responsible for making sure it happens. But it should be inclusive of all the faculty within that program at a bare minimum. And in some cases, given maybe some of the similarities among programs, maybe even more collectively across a discipline, right? I mean, in my home discipline of chemistry and biochemistry, I know when I was doing this, it wasn't just the chemistry faculty that were talking, it was the chemistry and the biochemistry faculty coming together to talk about the results, because the biochemistry students are taking chemistry courses and the chemistry students are taking a biochemistry course. And so we needed to have those deeper conversations as well. Any others?
Somebody mentioned being on contract. If you see there's an assessment timeline on that page, and you can complete the Weave report as soon as you have all the data available, even though it's not due to September. So you're not gonna be here in the summer. It's okay if you wanna complete it before you go on summer break, or when you get back, if you wanna complete it in the weeks prior. The rotation of program coordinators is in September. We ask that you please complete the Weave report before giving it to somebody else who only has a week to do it, please.
Yeah, we've actually had a few cases where a new program coordinator has contacted us and said, I've got to write this report that I know nothing about. That's not the best way to do this, right? So, and that creates confusion. So if you're the program coordinator, you're kind of, you're the one that should be responsible for making sure that that gets completed. Again, you don't have to complete the whole thing, but make sure you're handing it off in a way that makes sense and people aren't confused. And anything else on this one?
I think the important part of this question, at least with regard to the improvement aspect of assessment, is that if the program coordinator is really the only person who lays eyes on the assessment, on the report, and on the data, the program coordinator might be improving, but it's hard for the program to improve if the program doesn't get the results, doesn't get the data, and doesn't get the assessment.
How do you use assessment results to improve the program?
Okay, so in our program, we had a problem where we had to change the sequence. We don't require that students take methods before capstone is preferred, but we were having both courses ending up in the same semester. So this was giving some of our students double duty, where to graduate on time, some of them were having to do 2 writing intensive courses simultaneously. Doable, but not ideal. So by removing that and moving the capstone to the spring semester, there's still gonna be problems where maybe somebody has to take it out of order, but at least they're not having to take them both in the same semester in a few cases. So that was really helpful.
Okay. How many people think marking something as not met is a bad thing? Okay, Bertrand.
Well, no, I mean, let me just put a little philosophical thing in here. I mean, when you're talking to academic people, you're talking a bunch of high performers. And basically that means we just don't like, or we don't get something done. And so even though I'm the only one who raised his hand, I mean, I'm a heretic, so I'm saying these things. I'm pretty sure many of us just don't like that, especially when we're looking at a core skill in our discipline and we had a cohort where too few people really got to the level where we wanted them to. And that's just, and then let me keep going a little bit here. The challenge to me oftentimes is the improvement stuff. And I talked with Claire about that already. And I mean, as long as you've got a program where you really have people knowing what they're doing, the improvement can be this huge sea change that all of a sudden moves 30% of your student cohort into a different category or something like that. And so we might not really see much of the improvements that we get out of them, and oftentimes it might just not be possible if we're staying with the weightlifting analogy. I mean, yes, you want to improve, and that means you have to increment the challenge and all that, but I mean, this body will never bench press 300 pounds. Like I'm working on 200 right now, but that's as good as it gets.
So we want you to have not met targets at some point because that has area for improvement, right? If everyone's perfect, there's nothing to improve. So we definitely want you to have some times where there's not met targets. Then we want you to meet those targets and celebrate and then pick something else. Another thing about the continuous improvement, it does not have to be a huge thing. It can be anything from you change, the offerings of classes, you change program curriculum, you change pedagogy. But it can be really simple as I talked about this subject for 10 more minutes in my class, and let's see how students did. Just little tweaks can be counted as continuous improvement. So you don't have to completely upheave the program and change everything all the time. And then
prefer that you not do that.
yes, your students would prefer that you don't do that. And then also if you mentioned you'll never bench 300 pounds, that might not be the goal of your program is to, bench 300 pounds. But you can always reach your goal in one thing and then focus on another area instead. You can switch your outcomes, you can switch your measures, you don't have to stick with something forever. So, if all your students excel really well in this one area, there's no need to keep measuring it. You can pick something else, or maybe they need a little tweaking. Also, it's not often done here, but you can disaggregate your students' data if you want. That's something that's come about more recent, trend, but if you want to disaggregate, Pell Grant, no Pell Grant, that data too, if you really say your program, students of low income aren't doing as well, something like that, you can always disaggregate further, and make it kind of like a research study as well.
We do require you to disaggregate by modality though. So if you have a program that is taught here, online, and on Gulf Park, you gotta say something about Hattiesburg, online, and Gulf Park. Because we have to tell SACS that's a compliance piece. But more importantly, we need to make sure that the pedagogical deliveries that we are doing are effective for our student body. Online works for many things. It does not work for everything. And vice versa, right? There's some things that actually work pretty well online that may even be a little better than face-to-face, because I would argue that a good online delivery is much better than a poor face-to-face delivery, right? That seems to be logical to me. Yeah.
How do you actually quantitatively measure the improvement of program due to the assessment result. Because there could be so many other factors that affect the improvements of program.
There can be, and that comes down to just good experimental design. I view these all as experiments, so you've got to have a good, think of your outcome as a research question and make sure that your measurements can actually measure that, right? And so I don't know all the specifics with what you're doing there, but I mean, I think of all of these things as research questions. We're all researchers to some level, right? And so I think that's kind of how you have to approach this. So it could be you want 80% of your students to score or to get a particular question on an exam correct on their first attempt. You can measure that, you know, oh, this time it was 60%. Oh, well, I wonder, you know, having those conversations with faculty, why are our students not getting that?
Right.
You can have those conversations and put down an action plan. Next year, I'm gonna spend 10 more minutes on this topic in this particular class. Let's see if that makes an improvement.
So,
Well, the reason I'm asking, this semester, I just had an incredible class, imaginary class, and they were phenomenal, and I didn't change anything.
That's fine.
So I could see a program being improved, but had nothing to do with me, right?
and that's something you could always mention in your week report and that analysis of findings that your students were just different this semester. And that's okay to mention, any context that's given.
Yeah.
But with the improvement, you want your action plans to be specific and relate typically to like one outcome, one measure. So that way, you know, my improvements directly affected this data. And that data piece is gonna be how you show the improvement.
Anything else on this one? Yeah,
I'm here, right? So-
that's fine. That's
Okay.
good.
So aren't we supposed to have like multiple, semesters worth of measuring that?
You should have multiple measures, that is, or multiple years, so that we can do a longitudinal analysis.
Is 70 years or can it be semester?
Well, that's a good question. Can we do on a semester? The week reports are due on a yearly basis.
Right, are you saying like maybe only one class is taught once a year and you only have one semester?
Right.
That's fine. Not every class will be taught every single semester, so if your data's coming from that, it's perfectly fine, to only have it taught like one semester of data.
The SACS, though, is there a requirement? So
SACS's requirement is that, you all as faculty determine what it is that we're looking at for each program. And then we're seeking continuous improvement. That's it in a nutshell. And so, but it has to be measurable. It can't be, I feel my students awesome. You have to somehow measure whatever it is that you're working with.
but it's gotta be longer too, though. We can't do this 1 year where you say that. That's what I'm thinking.
And so what we will submit to SAC COC in our report is 2 years, we're doing 2 years of week reports. Yeah, so we'll do 2 years of week reports to show that we're collecting this on a longitudinal basis. Next question. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean, this is one that can easily be construed into an excuse, and it shouldn't be, but the colleague mentioned that when we're looking at our students, those are the ingredients that we have for the continuous improvement, and continuous improvement suggests it keeps going up. And the problem is from year to year, when the ingredients vary, you can't keep going up. I mean, if I've got a fantastic cohort of seniors 1 year,
but remember,
excellent results, and the next year, it might not be so great.
That's right. So that's an important point. You do not have to show each and every year an actual improvement. You have to show that we're striving for continuous improvement. You can try something new and it falls flat on, I mean, just, it doesn't work. Well, it's okay. We'll change it. We'll move from there. Well, I'm an experimentalist. I like to experiment, right? We don't just experiment willy-nilly. We actually have some thought that we put behind our experiments, right? But it's okay to experiment a little bit. And, you do not have to meet your targets each and every year. That's the important thing. And there may have years where you do, you may have years where you don't, but when you don't, what are you doing to try to get back to meeting those targets? Dan?
Well, on the other hand, the assessment result is highly dependent of the instructor, the typing of what instrument they use to assess. So 1 year the target is met because the instructor will be high score for everyone. Next year, it's a more strict instructor is not met.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. And one of the things that we hope faculty do in their conversation is come to some consensus among yourselves about what that measurement needs to be, what that instrument needs to be. Faculty certainly have the right and the ability to go in and teach the content as they want, right? But I would hope that all faculty would have a sense of, if I'm going to do that, I need to be effective with it, right? And so, but the program owns the assessment, right? So it's a program level thing. And so you all need to come together as a program and come to some consensus on what is going to be measured, how it's going to be measured. And if you see, I mean, you know, just because I'm qualified to teach a class doesn't mean I should. And if, you know, if the faculty decide that, you know, maybe you need to teach a different class, that's up to you as a faculty, right? Because sometimes it does have that variation. We see it sometimes with adjuncts. Sometimes adjuncts do a really great job. Sometimes adjuncts, you know, are coming in at the last minute and they're just helping you get things through, and maybe they didn't do such a great job on teaching that. But maybe we didn't also convey to that adjunct the importance of this particular topic and what needs to be conveyed. So keep that in mind as well.
And those are things that can be mentioned in the lead report. Like, you notice that this could have been an issue and you can address that. And that can be an area for improvement too. And then going back to the action plans, it's okay if your action plans don't work. Not everything you do may work, as long as you explain it did not work and that you're gonna try something else. Again, it's a spirit of improvement that you're trying, that's all we ask.
Yep. Excellent, JB.
Dr. Sorolla has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna
I'll come
comment.
back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just gonna comment, one thing we did in physics was, because we have several instructors teaching the same class, different sections, is we created a pool of exam questions from which we all draw from. And that way, you just incorporate, say, that exam, one of those exam questions into your exams, and then we have at least we're teaching the same kind of material. Then we're getting the.
So out of a 20 question exam or whatever, at least one of those questions is the
Yeah,
standardized question that you all are gonna use for your assessment.
Something like that.
Yeah, makes sense. That's a way to do it. So do your student learning outcomes align with the program's values? Think so?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any of you have questions about that? Do any of you know what your program actually values?
No.
Let's change that to a yes later. How about that? Each and every one of our programs at the institution are unique. Right? They have different things that they're trying to achieve with the student. But I think we can all agree that we're trying to give the student the best possible experience, the best possible education, and the best possible chance of success, however the student defines that. Right? Students in one program may be more likely to go to graduate school, others may be more likely to get a job, and that's how you're gonna measure, to some level, success of your students, being able to get them placed into whatever they should be placed in for what comes next in life. Okay? But I'll give it just another second there, go ahead. What could make the assessment more meaningful?
We had an example in our program, related to those last questions of values and meaningful. I got frustrated for a while because we were just discussing, employment. Whereas we had a huge, group also wanting to go into grad school, and so it was like, we were falling short. Because that wasn't their goal. And so just separating that out and having, measuring both intention of goal and then achievement goal.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we forget that we have goals as faculty, but students also come to our programs with their own goals. And making sure that we capture that as part of our assessment. That can be a trick, right? Because each and every student that you advise, some may want to get a job after 4 years, some may want to go get a master's degree, some may want to go to med school, some may want to on and on and on. And so keeping track of all that can be difficult, I get that, but ultimately, that's what we want. We want the students, whatever they come to us for, we want them to be able to achieve that. And I think each and every one of us can agree with that. That is difficult to measure, but if you're only measuring one piece of it, you're right, you're not capturing, you know, I'm sure you all had a rationale for making that selection, and it was relevant at one point. But you need to constantly evaluate that. Is that really what's happening?
Just want to chime in real quick. It is perfectly fine in your week report if you say like job placement or professional school or graduate school, something like that. You can all lump it together.
Nick, you had a.
I think changing the message about why we're assessing will make it more meaningful. You had a stat up there 15, 20 minutes ago showing that over 50% of the faculty are doing it for compliance. When you comply, you do it reluctantly, you do the bare minimum, you meet the standard and move on with your day, as opposed to providing some kind of incentive or motivation for doing it. So that's gonna come from your office. I think that's gonna come from the program coordinator to a certain extent as well. But
Well, that's why we're having this conversation today, and I hope that each and every one of you can go back and help. I hope you all drank the Kool-Aid. And actually go back and help be a good ambassador for the exact thing you're talking about, Nick, because I had a colleague, Suzanne Carbonaro, who said one time to me, if you're doing this only for SACS compliance, and that it's a wasted opportunity, right? Why are we going through all this work just to check off a box with SACS? When what we should be doing is doing stuff for our students in our program that happens to check off the box for SACS COC. And so I think changing our attitude a little bit about that is the important thing here. And Bert, did you have a?
Yeah, I mean, although I am a heretic, I mean, I appreciate that this is clarifying a few things that maybe also through my memory of the initial assessment frenzy 25 years ago, because the way it's working now is started about 25 years ago, that some things are getting clarified there. I mean, I remember distinctly that a lot of it was doctrine early on. Of course, they're different institutions, so nobody should feel insulted here, but I mean, one year they tell us, hey, for your assessment, check whether your students get employed. Next year, they came back and said, that's not a good measure because it might just mean that the job market is pretty good. Then they told us that grades are not assessment, and I assure you, any student who passed one of my classes or didn't pass one of my classes will tell you, yeah, my grades are assessment. I mean, you earned those. Then a couple of years later, I went into education, math education assessment, which is national one, where they specifically said, yes, you can use grades as assessment.
Yeah. Let me just comment on that.
Grades are sometimes contradictory, and
Yeah.
we need to get past that, and
Let me just comment on the grade part. I think there is a lot of confusion on grades. When we say you cannot use grades for assessment, we're talking about A, B, C, D, F.
As far as the whole course.
As far as the whole course, that's right. It doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, if you're, A may mean something, B, and F may mean something. I don't know what it means in between. When I was running track, if I was running around, I never had the coach say B+, right? I mean, they told me a time, they told me something that I knew, I could measure it, right? And what comes to an A or a B in your class may be very different in Mac's class, right? We all have the ability to assign the buckets that we place, but what I do know is if they got 80% of my students got this question right, and I know what that question is, we can make some type of really informed assessment. But just because I got an A in Chris's class, has got to be in my class, I don't know, maybe.
Means I'm a better teacher.
Maybe you're a better teacher.
We're getting close to time, but I do want to clarify on that grade thing. The reason you can't use overall grades is because it's not the impact, the things that go into the overall grade isn't necessarily just your outcomes. Like how many of you measure attendance? That's, not necessarily going to measure an outcome that you're looking at. We have an article linked on our website, Do Grades Make the Grade? It talks about that as well.
Very good. Well, one more.
I know he left, but to kind of piggyback on what Nick was saying, and I noticed he's the first year, or this is gonna be his first time coordinating. So this is my third year, and I don't want to sound critical. I'm very appreciative of this. I thank you for this. I was kind of grumpy at first because it's an extra thing on the already long list of things I have to do. But I think in line with what I think Nick was getting at, compliance to check the boxes, and USM is not my first institution, so I did compliance act stuff beforehand, and this is my third year doing this. And I think that first year, that second year, you're trying to learn the ropes and figure out what to do. So when you ask the question, what could make the assessment more meaningful, I think more broadly here, transitions or mentoring for your new coordinators. Because that's just not something that every program or every school either knows to do or how to do it, or they're in interim directors, or there's just so many changes. Attention or recognizing, even though, yes, we know this is really crucial, it's important, just even if you can't do anything extra to compensate, addressing the fact it's an extra over workload demand for the faculty member. Because when we hear things like communication is problematic between the faculty or between the administration, it's everybody. So I think that would make it more meaningful and helpful. And I know you can't standardize rubrics for every program, right? Because all of our SLOs are different and our meaning or the kinds of things we're trying to measure and do on the outside is different, whether we're accredited or not or whatever. It's some sort of rubrics. I'm glad to hear that the website has some resources. I've checked some of those out. But some kind of basic rubric or template, or hey, here's a great example of what the nutrition program has done or what math has done, might be really helpful. I'm not trying to add more work to everybody's plate. I just think having done this now for my third year, it would have helped to have this 3 years ago, and I know that's why we're doing it now, so thank you. But I do think that would help to make things more meaningful and would maybe not eliminate, but reduce the tendency for some faculty, either because they just don't know any better or they don't have time to not comply and just check the box, right? That's something I gotta do and I'm gonna worry about that later. Because those conversations we have or those hours that we spend in creating the WEAV reports and pulling the data together, doing the analysis, it really does take time. It's important and we wanna do it and we are researchers and we care. So I think that would help all of us to make it more meaningful.
Okay.
I just wanted to.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, and you're heard.
Yeah, no, and
So,
thank you for
yeah.
this is really helpful. This session is really helpful.
We'll definitely work on more resources. Just a quick plug, if you weren't in the first session, that in December and probably around May, I'll have an assessment 101 session similar to this, where I'll walk through every step of the assessment report and what you're required to do.
All right, we are at the end. Stay seated. We're gonna give away some door prizes.